Hollywood has always thrived on illusion, the glittering premieres, the carefully crafted romances splashed across newspapers, the perfect smiles beaming from movie posters. It was all designed to convince audiences that their favorite stars were flawless. But behind the glamour of the golden age, the studios worked just as hard to hide scandals that could destroy careers. And one of the biggest cover-ups of them all involved the King of Hollywood himself, Clark Gable. On screen, Gable was the ultimate leading man, dashing, rugged, irresistible. Off-screen, his private life was far more complicated. He was known for whirlwind romances and a restless heart, but there was one chapter of his story that remained buried for decades, protected by an elaborate web of lies, staged publicity stunts, and carefully managed appearances. At the center of it all was actress Loretta Young, celebrated for her elegance and morality, a star whose reputation seemed untouchable. Yet behind the image of Hollywood's good girl was a secret that threatened to unravel her career, and Gable's as well. A child, born in secrecy and hidden from the world. For years, newspapers ran glowing stories of Loretta's charm while simultaneously covering up her long absences. Friends and colleagues whispered, but the truth was shielded by the full force of Hollywood's publicity machine. It was a deception that would last for more than 2 decades, until the daughter herself began asking questions no one wanted to answer. So, how did Clark Gable and Loretta Young pull off one of Hollywood's greatest vanishing acts? And why did the truth remain untold until long after both of their careers had ended? Hollywood's perfect illusion. To understand how Loretta Young and Clark Gable managed to conceal the existence of their child, you first have to understand the world of old Hollywood. During the 1930s, studios didn't just employ actors, they owned them. Contracts tied stars to one studio for years, sometimes decades, and in exchange for fame and fortune, those studios controlled every aspect of their public image. Executives dictated what roles they played, who they were seen with, and even how they behaved outside the studio gates. Gossip columnists were often fed stories directly by publicists, and rumors that could tarnish a star's reputation were buried before they ever hit the press. To fans, the actors appeared larger than life, flawless, glamorous, and untouchable. Behind the curtain, however, the reality was much darker. Nothing was more threatening to a rising actress's career than an unplanned pregnancy, especially one outside of marriage. For women, stardom was built on purity and desirability. A whisper of scandal, even something as small as being seen with the wrong man, could destroy years of careful image building. For men, the risks were different, but just as real. Clark Gable may have been the rugged king of the screen, but the studio couldn't afford for him to be labeled reckless or irresponsible. A child born outside of wedlock would have painted him as exactly that. This was Hollywood's perfect illusion, a dream factory that demanded stars play their roles both on and off screen. And when real life threatened to intrude, the machinery of the studio system went into overdrive, spinning lies, staging appearances, and feeding the press exactly the story they wanted the public to believe. It was within this system of smoke and mirrors that Loretta Young would find herself trapped, carrying a secret that could ruin her career before it had even peaked. The elaborate disguise. When Loretta Young discovered she was pregnant in 1935, she and her family immediately understood the stakes. She was just 22 years old, her career was climbing rapidly, and a scandal of this magnitude would have ended it all. Abortion was both illegal and life-threatening, so there was only one option: hide the pregnancy at all costs. The plan began with carefully orchestrated publicity. Loretta didn't vanish suddenly, which would have only fueled speculation. Instead, she stayed just visible enough to seem busy while subtly setting the stage for her disappearance. In April, she attended a high-profile Hollywood wedding, standing alongside directors and actors in photographs splashed across the society pages. Weeks later, she hosted a tea for the press in her backyard, smiling gracefully for the cameras. But as spring turned to summer, the narrative shifted. Newspapers began reporting on her ill health and exhaustion, code words that Hollywood insiders understood but never questioned too closely. A glossy magazine profile called her the most tired little person in Hollywood, attributing her condition to months of grueling 18-hour workdays. By June, she and her mother were conveniently booked on an extended trip to Europe, complete with photographs of Loretta smiling aboard luxury liners and attending glamorous gatherings hosted by countesses and diplomats abroad. To the public, she was simply overworked, recuperating in style like any Hollywood star might. When she returned in August, her mother explained to reporters that Loretta had been in ill health for some time and had lost considerable weight. In reality, the opposite was true. Loretta was entering the late stages of her pregnancy. To protect her further, her doctor ordered her to refrain from motion picture work for 2 months, citing an undisclosed, delicate condition. In the coded language of the time, everyone knew what that meant. But no one dared print it. It was an elaborate performance, a cover story carefully crafted to maintain her image while concealing the truth. Yet despite all the effort, whispers persisted. And soon, Loretta's secret would become far harder to hide. The hidden birth. By the fall of 1935, the web of lies could only hold for so long. Loretta Young was now in the final stages of pregnancy, and even with the press distracted, she needed a place far from Hollywood's curious eyes. Her family quietly arranged for her to stay in a small cottage in Venice, California. A modest house tucked away from the studios, the gossip columnists, and the photographers who prowled for a scoop. Only her closest circle knew the truth. Friends stopped by under the guise of casual visits, but no one dared mention her condition out loud. Actor Spencer Tracy, one of her friends at the time, visited and told her he loved her, but even he avoided acknowledging what was plainly happening. Loretta, wrapped in comforters, lived like a shadow, sneaking out only at night for brief drives just to feel the outside air. Then, on November 6, 1935, the carefully guarded secret reached its climax. As Loretta went into labor, her family scrambled to make sure no outsider could connect the dots. Towels and blankets were stuffed into windows to muffle the sound. The greatest fear wasn't a curious neighbor. It was the milkman, who made his morning rounds and might overhear her screams. Her trusted physician, Dr. Halloran, chloroformed her to dull the pain. A backup doctor and nurse, deliberately kept in the dark about the patient's identity, waited idly in a car down the street. Inside the cottage, Loretta endured hours of labor on her sister's massage table, far removed from the safety of a hospital delivery room. Finally, she gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Loretta named her Judy after St. Jude, the patron saint of difficult situations. That same afternoon, a telegram arrived for Clark Gable, who was in New York attending the premiere of Mutiny on the Bounty. It read, "Beautiful, blue-eyed, blonde baby girl born 8:15 this morning." According to reports, Gable tore the telegram into pieces. The cover-up had succeeded, at least for the moment. But the most delicate part was still to come, ensuring that no one ever discovered the child's true parentage. A baby with no father. In the days after Judy's birth, the deception deepened. On November 13th, Dr. Halloran filed the birth certificate, but instead of naming Loretta, He listed the mother as Margaret Young, supposedly an artist in the film industry. The line for the father was left blank. It was a small detail, but one that symbolized the secrecy at the heart of Judy's existence. Meanwhile, Clark Gable made sure to distance himself from the rumors swirling in Hollywood. Publicly, he was linked to a string of women, actresses like Elizabeth Allen, socialites like Mary Taylor. And when asked, he brushed off the speculation with a casual laugh. "The rumors are all wrong," he told reporters, "although I am very flattered." For Loretta, the stakes were even higher. A single hint of scandal could undo everything. So when whispers began to circulate, her family staged yet another cover story. Judy would be placed in a Catholic orphanage. Later, Loretta would adopt her own daughter, presenting the arrangement as an act of charity rather than the exposure of a secret. It was a risky maneuver, but it worked. To the outside world, Loretta appeared every bit the devoted actress, busy with films and charitable appearances. Behind closed doors, however, she was living a double life, a rising star on screen, and a mother fighting to keep her child's identity hidden. The secret had survived Judy's birth, but keeping it buried would require even more elaborate maneuvers. Loretta's double life. By early 1936, Loretta Young was back in the public eye, and she played her part flawlessly. Magazine spreads showed her glowing in tailored gowns, while puff pieces described her as recovered and refreshed. Few suspected that behind the glamour, she was secretly nursing a newborn. At first, Judy remained in the Venice cottage under the care of a nurse named Frenchie, with Loretta visiting when her schedule allowed. But secrecy bred risk. When Frenchie hinted at blackmail, threatening to expose the truth, the family acted swiftly. Within days, Judy was placed in a Catholic orphanage where she could be shielded from scandal until Loretta was ready to bring her home. That moment came 2 years later. In June 1937, Loretta announced through gossip columnist Luella Parsons that she had adopted 2 little girls. Weeks later, one of the children was quietly reclaimed by relatives, leaving Loretta with only Judy. To the public, it was a heartwarming story of a star's generosity. To Loretta, it was the only way to reclaim her daughter without destroying her career. But the deception didn't stop there. Judy's resemblance to Clark Gable, especially her prominent ears, became harder to hide as she grew. Loretta kept her in bonnets for photographs, and when Judy was 7, arranged surgery to have her ears pinned back. It was an exhausting charade, but one Loretta believed was necessary. She was determined to protect both her daughter and her carefully constructed image, even if it meant living a life of half-truths. Careers and collisions. As the years passed, Loretta Young and Clark Gable's lives moved on, at least on the surface. Loretta's reputation only grew stronger. She became Hollywood's model of grace and morality, known for her elegance, her Catholic faith, and her almost untouchable image. Gable, meanwhile, cemented his place as Hollywood's ultimate leading man, adored by audiences and chased by gossip columnists. But their paths inevitably crossed again. In 1940, Loretta married Tom Lewis, an advertising executive, and went on to have 2 sons. Gable endured personal tragedy when his beloved wife, Carol Lombard, was killed in a plane crash in 1942, leaving him devastated. By the late 1940s, both had rebuilt their lives, and Hollywood saw an opportunity. In 1949, MGM cast Loretta and Gable opposite each other in Key to the City. To the public, it was a brilliant bit of nostalgia. 2 glamorous stars, reunited on screen. But behind the camera, the tension was palpable. Loretta was forced to share scenes with the man she had spent more than a decade carefully avoiding, the father of the daughter she had passed off as an adoption. During filming, Loretta collapsed on set, overcome by smoke used in one scene. Gable rushed to carry her to her dressing room, and the press, unaware of the real history, spun it as a sweet story of chivalry. The reality was far more complicated, a reminder of the secret they both carried but never acknowledged. For Loretta, the charade continued. For Gable, the scandal had all but vanished. Yet their shared past was never far from the surface. The truth surfaces. For more than 2 decades, Loretta Young's secret held. Judy grew up believing she was adopted, raised in a household that carefully avoided the truth. But by the late 1950s, whispers had become harder to ignore. Judy herself began noticing details that didn't add up, her striking resemblance to Clark Gable, the odd evasions whenever she asked about her origins. In 1958, at age 23, Judy confided to her fiancé, Joe Tinney, that she couldn't marry him because she didn't truly know who she was. His response stunned her. "You're wrong. I know everything about you. Your father is Clark Gable." The revelation cracked open years of doubt. When Judy confronted her mother directly, Loretta broke down. According to family accounts, she fled to her room and vomited, unable to face her daughter's demand for honesty. It was the beginning of a painful rift between them, one that would never fully heal. Decades later, Judy told her story in a memoir titled Uncommon Knowledge. In it, she described the lifelong secrecy, the confusing half-truths, and her mother's moralizing public image that stood in stark contrast to private reality. While she painted Gable in sympathetic terms, she struggled to forgive Loretta for what she saw as a betrayal. The book shocked Hollywood, stripping away the illusion Loretta had so carefully built. What had once been whispered in shadows was now on the record. Clark Gable had fathered a child with Loretta Young, and the entire town had conspired to keep it hidden. Loretta's final word. In her later years, Loretta Young remained the picture of elegance, but the secret she had guarded for so long never truly left her. By the 1990s, she was working with biographers and close confidants, carefully shaping the way her story would be told. In private, she acknowledged what the world already suspected. Judy was her daughter with Clark Gable, but she insisted the truth not be published until after her death. When Loretta passed away in 2000 at the age of 87, her posthumous memoir finally confirmed it. For the first time, the veil was lifted. The years of elaborate cover-ups, staged adoptions, and whispered rumors were no longer speculation. They were fact. For Judy, the truth had come decades too late. Her memoir, Uncommon Knowledge, made clear the emotional cost of living under such secrecy. She described a life filled with hypocrisy and deception, where even moments of joy were overshadowed by the lie she had been forced to live. For Hollywood, the revelation was a reminder of just how far the old studio system would go to protect its stars, and how deeply it could wound the people caught inside its machinery. Loretta's story closed the chapter on one of Hollywood's most infamous secrets, but it also raised an unsettling question. How many other carefully crafted images hid truths we'll never know? Because behind the glittering lights and perfect smiles, old Hollywood wasn't just about creating dreams. It was about burying scandals so deep they'd stay hidden for generations. And in the case of Clark Gable and Loretta Young, that buried truth was a daughter, a lifetime of deception, and a legacy forever shadowed by the illusion of perfection.
I love it because the relationship between my mother and my father in that film is extraordinary. You can see it on the screen, the love they feel for each other.